Welcome to Lunch with Tech Leaders, where we have engaging conversations about software development and cloud engineering with industry leaders and subject matter experts. These episodes are created by the Great Lakes Tech Leaders, an online community of technology practitioners. Please come join the conversation by visiting gltl.rbn.ai. Again, that's gltl.rbn.ai. Now strap in, because we're deploying to production in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Lunch with Tech Leaders. My name is Adam Oberhausen. I'm the Director of Cloud Architecture with Right Brain Networks, and I'm your host for today. Joining me today is my co-host, software and data consultant, Tom Kowalski. Say hi, Tom.
Hello.
Okay. So in this episode, we're going to be continuing our discussions on AI with a focus on the regulatory debate that has been fueled by the AI arms race that is currently underway. So we got a lot to cover today, so grab your lunch and buckle up. Tom, you missed last week. Excited to talk about AI this week. Last week was serverless. You missed a good show.
Yeah, bummed out sick. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. Ever since we, did that one episode, and it was kind of obvious, we needed to talk about this more. So I'm excited to, and I'm excited to bring Lance along with us on this journey of talking about it. If you want to say hi, introduce yourself, Lance.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Lance. I like to dabble in AI quite a bit, and I'm part of a lot of groups working on AI in general, specifically around this idea of heuristic imperatives to try to prevent Skynet. So, it extends to more than just regulation.
So for this show, Tom, I've always touted about how I use ChatGPT to help me kind of do the itineraries for shows and stuff, right? And I went down that path for this show. But it just didn't make any sense. So I really just kind of grabbed a bunch of articles, found some really interesting stuff, and I kind of did it the old-fashioned way. So it was actually a lot of fun. I've got so much material to cover today. I don't even think we're going to scratch the surface. So,
It's funny because I usually have seen videos, right, where people will say they'll do an episode on it on ChatGPT, and they'll be like, "This episode was fully generated by ChatGPT" or whatever. It's funny you went the opposite with it.
Yeah. So I think we should start kind of what I think really kicked off this discussion at a global level, which is the open letter, the Pause Giant AI Experiments open letter. On March 22nd, 2023, an open letter was submitted to futureoflife.org calling for a pause in advanced AI development. The letter was signed by many big names in tech and research. I don't know a lot of the academic names, but Elon Musk was on there, Steve Wozniak, Andrew Yang, Yoshua Bengino, founder of scientific director at Mila. And the list goes on and on. There's just in that letter they called for an immediate pause of at least 6 months of the training of AI systems more powerful than ChatGPT-4. So this basically said, the letter clarified, this doesn't mean a pause on AI development, merely stepping back from the dangerous arms race and the ever larger unpredictable black box models with emerging capabilities. So, did you guys get a chance to, Tom, did you look at the letter? Did you see it? Are you aware of it?
Yeah, I'm aware of it. Skimmed through it. But yeah.
How about you, Lance? Did you take a look at it? Did you? So the letter is pretty short itself, but then they actually link to some other artifacts about, the policy recommendations and things of that sort. Did you get a chance to read through those?
I didn't get a chance to read the letter. I definitely have been aware of the letter, and many of the participants like Andrew Yang and Elon Musk who have signed it.
Yeah, and so what I think was interesting is to figure out, well, what's driving this reaction? What really triggered this reaction of the community just to kind of say, let's put a halt on doing anything bigger than ChatGPT 4. and what I think it boils down to is that many of the leading AI researchers and scientists believe that artificial general intelligence is much closer than we had previously thought. And if you're talking about artificial general intelligence, if that becomes a reality, just the ability of a intelligence that is billions of times more intelligent than human could become part of be sharing of the planet with an intelligence that, could be thousands, hundreds, billions of times more intelligent than humans, right?
Yeah. It's, currently people are comparing GPT to talking with a extremely intelligent toddler. I can't imagine what GPT-5 looks like with all this reinforced human learning behind it. The more that there were some studies around the input into these AI models, and they were saying that actually the smarter prompts make smarter AI. So the more that humans use it, the crazier it's going to get. Just by getting the feedback from so many people. I personally think that there were some people don't have ulterior motives for the letter, and I think that some people are genuinely concerned because it does feel like another one of these like revolutions that was similar to what the manufacturing, mass production did to society back when most people were farmers. And obviously we know what happened after that. Not so great for humanity. In the fact that the transition was so fast that society had to catch up, and then we had warfare because of it. Hopefully we can prevent that in the future. For this time period, I think it's different. I think that there was a lot of people in different economic circumstances in that period of time, and transitioning jobs was maybe more difficult for people. But I don't know. There's definitely...
Yeah, and then there's like, to piggyback off your thoughts there, that all led to our, the Industrial Revolution, of course, led to our dependency on fossil fuel. So at the time, we're marveling what our machines can do in this infrastructure we're building, but then 125 years later, we're facing a climate change crisis where the planet might not be livable, right? So there's 100 years ago, there was no thought about what the carbon emissions could be doing, right?
Totally. And to piggyback on what you're saying, my feeling is I don't like the pause, because this is my personal opinion, because I think that it's a little bit selfish to all the people that really could use this to use AGI. All the people that have the terminal illness that maybe in 5 or 10 years they might die, but if AGI was around, would heal. People would potentially get a treatment for their ailments and extend their lives and have less suffering. 6 months might be the difference between that and then living longer.
Yeah. I think they knew writing the letter that it really is no one's going to pause, right? This just really brought a lot of awareness, brought the conversation to the forefront, kind of circling back to what's driving the reaction. In the letter, it says the central hope of the letter is that the AI companies currently racing each other will coordinate on how they can proceed more safely, right? That's what they want to get out of this. And they even cited some examples of the past, which is something I wasn't even familiar with. In 1975, the Asilomar Conference on Recombinant DNA, due to potential safety hazards in the 60s and 70s, scientists had halted experiments using recombinant DNA technology. So they kind of cite this as an example. Like in the past, we've developed technologies at a pace that caused enough concern for us to pause and put some guardrails in place before we proceed. So, I think it's very interesting that this letter came out. I think it's interesting that a lot of people are talking about it. Several public comments by the leaders of OpenAI, Anthropic, and DeepMind have all acknowledged the risks and call for regulation. Although I do think it can be a little symbolic, like especially in America, like you can say we should regulate this, knowing that it's very unlikely that, given the political climate, that anyone is really going to agree on how to regulate something like AI. Looked like you had some thoughts on your mind, Tom. Did you want to share something?
It's interesting, talking about the AGI, right, and then also talking about ChatGPT, where is some of the scientists, and again, I'm not any expert in this, but they'll say that the large language learning model, right, that's uses the basis for ChatGPT, it couldn't achieve AGI, right? It's not the right technology to get there. And I was watching an interview with Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, and he kind of agreed with that too. And there's kind of a difference, right, of can this pass like a Turing test, right? And it doesn't seem like a human versus what like the AGI, right, the artificial general intelligence is. So I think they're on two different levels, and it's interesting, right, like putting a pause on this large language models as a pause to getting to like AGI.
Yeah, that's a great insight, and I want to share what I found in my research for the show here. So Geoffrey Hinton was one of the pioneers in deep learning who developed some of the most important techniques for artificial intelligence. He announced that he's left Google. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was, a key player in the AI space at Google. He resigned out of concerns that, he wants to focus on be able to communicate more openly with the public about his concerns with AI. And circling back to what you just said about the machine learning, the LLMs versus human brain, he had some really interesting thoughts. Large language models are made from these massive neural networks with huge number of connections, right? But they're still tiny compared to the human brain, right? So our brains have 100 trillion connections, but the large language models have maybe half a trillion at most. But GTP4 knows hundreds of times more than any one person on the planet knows, right? So it's maybe actually a better learning algorithm than the human mind. It's his analogy was like there's basically two types of intelligences on the planet now. There's the animal brains, and then there's these neural networks. And if you think about it that way, the way he feels about it is like it's like an alien has landed on our planet and can speak really good English. And the ability of these neural networks, he's describing it as almost a new and better form of intelligence. So, I agree that it can't do what the human mind can do, but it could do things in a different way, a different type of intelligence that the human mind could never be capable of, right? Which I think it's already demonstrating that it can do.
Right, which makes it hard to quantify, like the amount of neurons versus the amount of points that a large language model or a neural network can process versus they're just different intelligences. I totally agree with that. It's funny because an LLM is not inhibited by having to do more than just process text. It doesn't have to process visual stimulus. It doesn't have to process all this nervous system activity in real time. So it gets to specialize, and I think it's therefore better at definitely like processing information and data. So stuff that humans aren't necessarily always initially equipped for, and requires a lot of training to become an expert.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, like where do you stand, Lance? Do you think AI will lead to the destruction of humanity, or do you have a more of a AI summer type worldview of how this will play out?
I think that, I'm always optimistic. The only things I think that could potentially be, I think for the most part, people are wanting AI to be helpful for humanity. I do think that there are powerful people that, if given enough of this technology with enough people that they can steer in the wrong direction, it's to me, it's fear. It's fear that will probably create a situation where people create AIs to defend themselves with the motivation of taking over other people. And so this is all, it's humanity self-destructing, using fear to justify creating defensive or attacking technologies that wipe out their enemies.
Tom, same question. Do you think AI has the potential to wipe us out as a species, or are we just overreacting?
So that's kind of, going back to what I was saying is, like the LLM model, a lot of people say it can't get there, right? Of like the takeover. It could be smarter than us, right? And know a lot more than us, be able to process us, but it's that the wanting to, right, is where like that's kind of like a lot of the experts are saying, right? That's where it can't get to that AGI level, right? That general intelligence of deciding what it wants to do, versus just being really smart and knowing to put together a bunch of information. So I don't know. What's your take on that, Lance?
I have seen a lot of things being built on even the existing LLMs, cognitive architectures that, with chain of thought prompting and recursion and just having it continually running with different kinds of personas. I have seen some crazy things happening. I don't think it's necessarily, I think the goal setting for an AI is not hard. And I think that it's just a matter of how we build the cognitive architectures to motivate these things to continue to just run. So it's these automated systems that keep recursively talking to themselves work pretty actually astonishingly well and can be given high level goals to just continue doing things. So I don't know if that's necessarily true.
I think some of those out there, there's baby AGI, you got Auto GPT, just some GitHub projects that kind of demonstrate rudimentary, using recursion, creating what they call an agent, an agent bot that works independently to solve a problem, and it can actually communicate with other agents. It's really interesting. And I think when I see that with I think when you think about like the speed of human technology advancement with Moore's law, like right every 2 years the compute capacity doubles, right? I think if there's an AI that can recursively train itself and get smarter and smarter, like it could be like a logarithmic thing, right? Like it could get smarter at a scale that we're just not prepared for. And it's smarter in quotes, like what does that mean?
What does that mean? Yeah, just smarter, but yeah, what does that mean?
But giving it goals is not a difficult thing. It can already chain of thought itself. You just ask it to, give me, based on this high level goal, give me subtasks, and it'll just keep churning on different ideas, and you can give it different failure states and frustration. And there's a lot of cognitive architectures that are being built right now around GPT even. So I've witnessed some stuff that's interesting. So I don't think that we're necessarily far off.
Okay. I think this is probably a good segue to talk about some actual policy recommendations that were in the open letter. There's a few things here. You got the policy recommendations, which were in that open letter. The Biden administration recently published a blueprint for AI Bill of Rights, which is also another interesting read. There's, of course, the European Union is well ahead of us in terms of coming up with what I would call general AI regulations that make a lot of sense because they seem to be able to just cooperate a little more than us in the States. And then there's the China situation, which is really interesting because they are basically like trying to fit a large language model that interprets vast amounts of data into what the Chinese state wants to portray and control information is real interesting as well. So just kicking it off with the OpenAI, the first recommendation they have is mandate robust third-party auditing and certification. So recommending a third-party auditing of such systems across a range of benchmarks for the assessment of risks, including possible weaponization and unethical behaviors, a mandatory certification by accredited third-party auditors before those high-risk systems can be deployed, is their first recommendation. And I'll just keep moving on unless you guys have thoughts you want to chime in on with that.
I don't really necessarily agree, but
yeah, okay. Why not?
I think it can stifle innovation to just, I mean, you see how the banks work. Not even startup banks can get off the ground necessarily easily because they have, you have banks like JP Morgan who have a auditor overseeing all the code every single time they commit, and you can't really do it. And I just don't think that it's going to, when everyone in their mother-in-law can access and download an LLM open source and just feed it and just use it decentralized. I mean, it's I think that's just unrealistic.
Yeah. I didn't like your banking regulation analogy because I think banks need to be more regulated than they are because they're still failing. But I get your point, right? It's going to stifle innovation. You're going to have situations where the people in the industry are creating the auditing firms. It just becomes like an incestuous AI industrial complex, right? So I get it. Let's move on though. This one I think has a little bit more maybe common sense to it. Regulate access to computational power. At present, the most advanced AI systems are developed through training that requires an enormous amount of computational power.
I think that just gives power to the rich, and it just gives entrenched interest. Just like my why I don't like bank regulation. I think that the current bank regulations favor just bigger institutions who can afford to deal with all these regulators, and it's just yeah.
Their argument from the letter is that in practical terms, compute is more easily monitored and governed than other AI inputs, such as talent, data, or algorithms. It can be measured relatively easily, and the supply chain for advanced AI systems is highly centralized, which means governments can leverage such measures in order to limit the harms of large-scale models. So I did see they actually put a chart in the open letter that kind of shows the amount of compute required for like ChatGPT 4 and some of the more recent ones, and it is like orders of magnitude much more computation needed. But I mean, I don't know. To me, it seems like it makes sense. You got someone who's gonna, could if you have unfettered access to these GPUs that are used to train these models, bad actors could do some bad things. I don't know.
The models are I don't know. It seems like that regulation's not going to be relevant for very long. It's just they're going to set some standards, and then things are going to change, and then government's going to take a long time to rewrite that regulation. So,
yeah. Third on the list is establish capable AI agencies at the national level. So we all know adding another bureaucracy to the federal government is going to get this under control.
If they use AGI, maybe self-regulating.
Yeah. basically monitor public developments in AI progress and define a threshold for which types of advanced AI systems fall under the regulatory oversight of the agency above a certain level of compute or that affect a particularly large group of people. Interesting. Policy recommendation number 4 is establish liability for AI-caused harms. So this is, this proposal would impose a financial cost for failing to exercise necessary diligence in identifying and mitigating risks, shifting profit incentives away from reckless empowerment of poorly understood systems toward emphasizing the safety and well-being of individuals, communities, and society as a whole. So if you develop some kind of AI, let's say a medical AI chatbot, and it, tells people to take the wrong medicine or something, I think that's kind of getting at that.
Right. I wanted to mention really quick my work with heuristic imperatives.
Sure.
There's our group is working on trying to figure out a way to make sure that we are keeping AI aligned with our interests and make sure that the AI are always benevolent. So some interesting work we've done. We've been using a lot of trained models, even models that aren't GPT, to see whether or not what our experiments are, whether or not they're working. We created, and I can't take credit. There's some other person that's been researching this for years, but you can actually, using language, you can create functions. So you can tell it, the heuristic imperatives we've been playing with are to reduce suffering, to increase prosperity, and to increase understanding. And if you insert that into the system prompt of GPT, and you try to get it to do things, you push the boundaries of the different contexts that it's been put through. It does very well. It performs very well. We haven't had it perform incorrectly with those heuristic imperatives. So we're definitely hopeful that, and actually I'm pretty sure that OpenAI has been looking at it as well, to help train their models. And so even if you have a model out, even if it's completely decentralized and you can grab a model off the shelf from open source, if you want to make sure that you are make sure your AI is aligned with your interests, you can just easily inject that into your model and make sure that happens.
How
Interesting.
do you see that, like from a regulatory standpoint? Do you see, something like that being enforced, or?
That would be kind of amazing. I mean, yeah, I would love it if that happened, to be honest. I don't know if I necessarily see it happening on a major scale without people. I just feel like a lot of people it's going to be more trend based, where a lot of people realize this is a good thing, and then most AIs will have this, and then people will be like, hey, this is a good idea. Maybe it'll eventually become regulatory. That would be nice, but
Yeah, and just going to like Adam, like all the things that you mentioned are great, right? For one organization, one government to regulate. But I think the issue, right, is there's governments all over the world with all different motives and values, right? That everyone has. So something that Sam Altman was talking about was, there needs to be kind of like a coming together Congress of everybody, kind of defining, what are the standards that we can all agree with, what kind of what Lance was talking about, that are kind of like those baselines. So yeah, that's interesting.
Well, you also want to make sure you're not, you also don't want to align with the user. You have to align with humanity, because otherwise, if you align with the user, what you're talking about with nation states and whatnot, injecting their imperatives into things, that becomes a huge issue. It needs to be, AI is here for humanity to make us better as a whole and not just individuals.
That's interesting what you just said, Lance. And Tom, circling back to what you said about the coming together, and that I want to reference that article I mentioned earlier about Geoffrey Hinton, and he basically was saying, like, the way we live as a society and interact with each other as humans could change because of what AI is capable of, right? And like that's kind of like those people that are at the forefront of the thinking here are already kind of seeing that, like, yeah, it doesn't, if the US has a bunch of AI regulations and the European Union has their set and China has their set, you're kind of setting up a scenario where you have competing AIs out there, doing cyber attacks or surveillance, or, it's just not, if we're not all aligned as a species, as an intelligent species, right, then there's going to be bad actors or nation states that are going to try to use this tech to their advantage. I know we're getting close to time. I did want to circle out the rest of the policy recommendations from the letter. And maybe we can do like another episode on this, because I think we're just scratching the surface. Number 5 on the recommendation of the open letter was introduce measures to prevent and track AI model leaks. So they're calling for a watermarking of AI models. Watermarking of AI models provides effective protection against stealing, illegitimate redistribution, and unauthorized application, because this practice enables legal action against identifiable leakers. So I'm not familiar with how you watermark an AI model, but I think it's something out there that's possible.
I think maybe what they might be referring to is like saying that, they're citing your sources or providing links to the source or something like that. Could be a watermark.
I think they're talking about the model itself, like if someone got their hands on a proprietary model, or I know a lot of these are already open source, so I guess it's a moot point, but yeah, I don't know.
Trained on a certain set of information that you can always get it to respond back, right? Inferred the same way. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Number 6 on the recommendation is expand our technical AI safety research funding. Despite nearly $100 billion of private investment in AI in 2022 alone, it is estimated that only about 100 full-time researchers worldwide are specifically working to ensure AI is safe and properly aligned with human values and intentions. So, Lance, glad you're out there fighting the good fight for humans.
I think they forgot to count us.
So, but yeah, I mean, that's a staggeringly low number of people that are, and of course, I've read the headlines about OpenAI or Google slashing their ethics team, or Microsoft getting rid of their AI ethics teams. I didn't read into it too much other than the headlines, but it is concerning that they're it seems like they're putting their go-to-market in front of safety concerns, without a doubt.
100% agree. I don't think that the tech companies that are trying to push forward with AI are being responsible enough at this point.
And last on the policy recommendation is develop standards for identifying and managing AI-generated content and recommendations. So creators of the most powerful AI systems have acknowledged that these systems can produce convincing textual responses that rely on completely fabricated or out-of-context information. For society to absorb these new technologies, we will need effective tools that allow the public to evaluate the authenticity and veracity of content we consume.
I mean, that's a problem prior to AI.
Yeah, I find it ironic that Elon Musk, the owner of Twitter, is one of the major endorsers of this letter, and he controls a platform that is notoriously spreading misinformation.
Well, I don't think that his motives for wanting them paused were the same as everyone else's, because he continued to develop AI to try to catch up to current GPT models. And so,
yeah,
I also I wrote a little tweet about how I thought he was trying to be the next Rupert Murdoch with AI. And that tweet got suppressed. So,
so the open letter is calling for the expansion of bot or not laws, which require disclosure when a person is interacting with a chatbot. These laws prevent users from being deceived or manipulated by AI systems impersonating humans, and facilitate contextualizing the source of the information.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I think there's some nuggets in there. I mean, we didn't even touch on the Biden administration's blueprint for AI Bill of Rights that is goes into much more depth than this letter does. So, and I know there's some things in the Senate happening. That the Senate's kind of proposing their own framework, and yeah, there's just a lot of moving parts here. It'll be real interesting, and I think just like with all regulations, it's just they're always going to lag behind the technology. So yeah,
I heard Jon Stewart saying that it was the leadership in Congress is effectively just like they don't really do anything. It's the army of the people that help the assistants.
yeah. The lobbyists work with the assistants to write the laws, and the lobbyists are funded by the industry. So it just becomes kind of like, well, why bother? Like, I don't know. I think you do need people in the industry to help write the legislation and the regulations, but I like, again, it just gets back to just like a industrial complex that kind of defeats its purpose.
What's nice is that GPT can help interpret laws in a way that people can understand better now. So you're not reading legalese, and then you can actually try to abuse the framework to see, okay, given if this scenario happened, am I violating the law?
So meanwhile, over in China, they've drafted a policy that companies must heed the Chinese Communist Party's strict censorship rules, just as websites and apps have to, and they have to, promote socialist core values. The content of AI systems will need to reflect socialist core values and avoid information that undermines state power or national unity. So that's going to be a big challenge for China. They've already had several LLMs that have become available, which have since been shut down by the Chinese government because they give responses that aren't aligned with the worldview of the Chinese government. So I think it's really interesting that China's in an interesting spot because they want to lead. They want to be leaders in AI, but they also have such a tight control of information. But they've proven they can make it work. They've done it with the internet. They've done it with other facial recognition, mobile phones. Basically, China's just turned all these technologies into a form of state surveillance. So I'm sure they'll probably figure out the same way to do that with AI.
Well, I mean, and it may be kind of a good thing in the way that they are figuring out how to do that, to apply hey, are these models, for the good or for the bad, right? Maybe not, in regulating and saying, yeah, it has to follow these values that only a certain set of people agree with, but at least, some of the baseline ones that Lance was talking about of, the reducing suffering, right? Like to being able to do that test to make sure your model is safe. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm reading here that they have censorship of specific words in the AI bots. Like it can't mention the date June 4th, 1989, the day of the Tiananmen Square massacre, and other things like that. So it's like truly suppressing, historical facts at that point. So, yeah, I mean,
I agree with.
And I'm not making a claim that Western society is benevolent and pure. Every society has their issues. I do think it's fascinating to see how the different approaches to the regulation. That's my point. I want to get across.
It's interesting because you have, at some level, you're going to have, so like violence and whatnot is, strict, is moderated out of current GPT models. But, at some point, Hollywood's going to want it because they're going to want to generate simulated violence. And so there's going to have to be context when you open that box. It'll be interesting to see what China does with that when they have to open up their box a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we're at time, so I want to give Tom and Lance a chance to ask any more questions or topics before I close it out here.
I wanted to mention something about the DAOs, DAOs. They're decentralized autonomous organizations. Interesting to look up if we're trying to create, I do think that at some point nation states will have less power and that that AI will inevitably be controlling everything, but that's a, eye in the sky kind of thing. And potentially having decentralized organizations run by AI that help humanity maybe better than how our countries are serving us. But our countries will probably still exist, but in vastly different forms. And maybe something like a DAO would be the answer to organizations that benefit humanity better. I'm not sure, but maybe.
So that's interesting, that because I want to kind of go off of that, right? Because I think some of the stuff that Adam talked about and, policies, regulations, it's kind of easy because there is a responsible organization that can be fined, reprimanded or, whatever, where, yeah, that gets a little more difficult in, decentralized, DAO. So yeah, because I kind of was agreeing with, okay, yeah, it needs to be more like the accountability, right? Seems like an easier way to regulate that. Where yeah, it kind of opens up a different door when you talk about things being decentralized. And yeah, that I feel like that's kind of like that difference, right? It's where the AGI and where we are now, kind of that perfect storm is kind of like a decentralized autonomous organization that could think for itself.
Totally.
All right. I guess I'll wrap it up here. I want to take the opportunity to thank all of our listeners for tuning in to today's episode of Lunch with Tech Leaders. We hope you found the conversation informative and valuable. Love to have you join us again next week when we're going to be talking about AI and game development, hosted by Ray Welker. So I think we're hoping to have some subject matter experts lined up who are actually in the game development industry using AI that are part of the community here. So very excited for that talk. And Lance, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Probably going to invite you anytime we talk about AI.
Sure.
Since you're working so heavily in the space. Love your insights. And Tom, thanks as always. You did a great job. And
You, Adam.
make sure you all tune in for next week. Okay. Adios.
Ciao.
Thanks.